What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Owens Recovery Science Podcast. I would like to say a special thank you if you are, in fact, listening to this podcast on Memorial Day, because that means you're kind of along for the ride with us a little bit. As you may have gathered, today's podcast is going to be a departure from our usual discussion around BFR exercise and rehabilitation. Today's podcast, we're going to focus largely upon our service members that have lost their lives in combat in service for our country, because in the end, that is what Memorial Day is all about. And if you didn't know that, disappointingly, you're in good company. About 28% of the U.S. population knows what Memorial Day is truly about. And I have to be completely honest with you, I was in the camp of I really didn't know as recently as 2 years ago. And in some ways, the idea for this podcast comes out of a rather ignorant text that I sent to Johnny and Ben and Zac. And that text was basically running an idea by them for a Memorial Day social media post that I had. And if I'm being even more honest, I think I was probably on my couch drinking coffee on Memorial Day, scrolling Instagram and seeing all these posts and going, shoot, man, I don't have anything that I was planning to do for Memorial Day on social media, and I probably should. And so I texted the guys, and I had a rather ill-conceived post put together, and Zac chimed in pretty quick, and he let me know in a nice way that I kind of had my head up my rear a little bit, that I didn't really know what Memorial Day was about, and I was in the end rather embarrassed. Not because Zac made me feel bad, but because I just felt like I should have known. I have two grandfathers that served in World War II. I have an uncle that was a Marine helicopter pilot. I felt like I should have known the difference between Veterans Day and Memorial Day. But if you don't know the difference, you're in good company. A lot of people don't know the difference. And the difference is very simple. Veterans Day is intended to be all-encompassing for all veterans. If you were an enlisted service member, you're a veteran, and we want to thank you for your service. But Memorial Day is more about honoring those servicemen and women who have died in combat, serving our country, defending our freedoms. And so we want this podcast to be focused on that. And so we want to try to tell stories about service members that you probably don't know, and we want to ask you to listen to them, because I don't care if you were the most heroic person ever in combat or you just died by happenstance. I think your story deserves to be heard, because someone's story is so much more than how they died. That is by no means the impact of someone, how they died in combat, whether it be heroic or not. And so I want this to be we want this to be a podcast where we bring light to those stories as best we can. And so if you know someone or have a family member or a friend, and you know a story that you'd like us to tell, or maybe we have you on and you tell it, the options are going to be open every year for this. And so we want to try to get those stories out there as best we can. And those stories have all kind of fingers that branch into all parts of life. And so we want to address those as well. And we'll do some of that today, and we'll do some of that in the future. I want to kick us off by telling you a little bit of a history of Memorial Day. And so I'm going to read something that I've put together. And at the end of that, we're going to observe a moment of silence which will, if you started this at the exact right time that we put out there, it'll be at 3 p.m. Eastern. Technically, the observance of a moment of silence within the U.S. is supposed to be 3 p.m. local, but given that 3 p.m. Eastern would be the earliest time you could observe it within the U.S., we've just kind of chosen that time. And if you're on the West Coast like me, you can just kind of do the math a little bit. But if you're along with us for the ride, I'd like to say an extra special thank you to you for paying that much attention to what we're doing, because at least some thought kind of went into this, and so thank you for that. I personally appreciate it, and I know we as a company appreciate it as well.
This is the Owens Recovery Science Podcast, hosted by physical therapist Johnny Owens.
All right, let's do Memorial Day. Memorial Day was originally called Decoration Day. It's a day of remembrance for those that have died in service for the United States of America. It's difficult to prove the origins of the day, as there are more than 24 towns and cities who lay claim as the birthplace. But in May of 1966, President Lyndon Johnson stepped in and he officially declared Waterloo, New York, as the birthplace of Memorial Day. But no matter the origins of the day and where it officially started, Memorial Day is born out of a desire to honor the dead from the Civil War. The Civil War ended in 1865, so this goes back a very, very long time. On the 5th of May in 1868, so 3 years after the Civil War had ended, General John Logan issued an order called General Order Number 11. General John Logan was the commander of the Grand Army of the Republic, and in this order he proclaimed that the 30th of May, 1868, is designated for the purpose of strewing with flowers or otherwise decorating the graves of comrades who died in defense of their country during the late rebellion, and whose bodies now lie in almost every city, village, and hamlet churchyard in the land. He continued in that order and said, "Let us then, at the time appointed, gather around their sacred remains and garland the passionless mounds above them with the choicest flowers of springtime. Let us raise above them the dear old flag they saved from dishonor. Let us in this solemn presence renew our pledges to aid and assist those whom they have left among us as sacred charge upon a nation's gratitude, the soldiers and sailors, widow and orphan." Because the day wasn't the anniversary of any particular battle, the general called it the date of Decoration Day. On the first Decoration Day, 5,000 participants decorated the graves of 20,000 Union and Confederate soldiers buried at Arlington Cemetery, while General James Garfield made an historic speech. By the end of the 19th century, Memorial Day ceremonies were being held on May 30th, so they just picked that last day in May. And those were being held throughout the nation. State legislatures passed proclamations designating that day as Memorial Day, and the Army and Navy both adopted regulations for proper observance at their facilities. It wasn't really until after World War I that the day was expanded to honor those who have died in all American wars. Previously, it was just intended to honor those who had died in the Civil War. But after World War I, Memorial Day began to honor those who had died in war, in any of the American wars. And so the genesis of this really seems somewhat unknown, but it could be in part to the fact that the Commonwealth of Nation member states, after World War I, declared to memorialize the fallen from all countries that had fought in what was then known as the Great War, and we now know as World War I. Remembrance Day, or Armistice Day, is held on November 11th, memorializing the end of hostilities on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. Now, this day is familiar in the United States because we know it as Veterans Day, and in Great Britain it's known as Remembrance Day. And so it seems as though perhaps the codifying, I don't know if codifying is the right word, but the declaration of this day throughout the world as being a day to remember veterans seemed to kind of push the U.S. to more take Memorial Day as a day to honor those that actually died in combat. Now, it's a long-held tradition to wear red poppies on Memorial Day, and the roots of that practice are tied to a poem titled "In Flanders Fields." This poem was written by Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, who was a physician in the Canadian Army. He penned this memoriam upon walking amongst the graves of the fallen soldiers from the Second Battle of, and I'm going to mess this up, but I think it's Ypres in 1915. Ypres is spelled Y-P-R-E-S. It's in Belgium. I know that. I didn't Google how to pronounce it, so my apologies if I butchered that. Lieutenant Colonel McCrae noted that while the poppies grew among the graves, they were very resilient flowers. The poppy is able to lay dormant for many years in the soil, only to reappear in great numbers, covering fields which had lay bare for many years previously. This held significance for Lieutenant Colonel McCrae, as he wrote of the heroes who appeared in great numbers to come to the aid of others against the oppression and tyranny during the Great War, and who would lie dormant until their call was heard again. Shortly after the publication of In Flanders Fields, the poem led to the use of the poppy to signify fallen soldiers across Europe and the United States. Just 3 years after its publication, Lieutenant Colonel McCrae passed, and Moyna Michael wrote a poem as tribute to McCrae. The poem, together with Ms. Michael's promotion of the poppy as the official symbol for the remembrance of the fallen, created what is now an iconic symbol of history. Poppies, due to her enthusiasm, really became the symbol of the American Legion, and funds from the sale of poppies were and still are used to support the needs of disabled veterans. And so I'd like to read to you the poem by Moyna Michael. It's called "We Shall Keep the Faith." Oh, you who sleep in Flanders fields, sleep sweet, to rise anew. We caught the torch you threw, and holding high we keep the faith with all who died. We cherish, too, the poppy red that grows on fields where valor led. It seems to signal to the skies that blood of heroes never dies, but lends a luster to the red of the flower that blooms above the dead in Flanders field. And now the torch in poppy red we wear in honor of our dead. Fear not that ye have died for naught. We'll teach the lesson that you wrought in Flanders field. And so in many ways, it's kind of why we have this podcast, is we want to help be part of teaching that lesson on Memorial Day. In 1971, with the passage of the National Holiday Act, Memorial Day, though it is still often called Decoration Day, was declared a national holiday by an act of Congress. It was then also placed on the last Monday in May. To ensure that the sacrifices of America's fallen heroes are never forgotten, in December 2000, the U.S. Congress passed and the President signed into law the National Moment of Remembrance Act, creating the White House Commission on the National Moment of Remembrance. The Commission's charter is to encourage the people of the United States to give something back to their country which provides them so much freedom and opportunity, by encouraging and coordinating commemorations in the United States of Memorial Day and the National Moment of Remembrance. The National Moment of Remembrance encourages all Americans to pause wherever they are at 3 p.m. local time on Memorial Day for 1 minute of silence to remember and honor those who have died in service to this nation. As Moment of Remembrance founder Camilla Laspada states, it is a way we can all help put the memorial back in Memorial Day. And so we would like to ask you at this time to observe a 1 minute silence with us. Welcome back, everybody. I don't know. We always say welcome back, and I guess maybe it is welcome back. I don't know. People are coming to listen to this for some reason. I would like to say just briefly, and I'm sure Zach, you've kind of had this experience as well, but I've actually met people that listen to the podcast now, and what has been really awesome, while I feel kind of like it's a 15 minutes of fame sort of thing, but what has been great is people have really just been complimentary a lot of the time, and has said how they enjoy how we bullshit back and forth and give each other grief. And I think you and I are kind of the chief two of that, of giving each other hell. But always it's in good fun, and sometimes somebody actually makes a mistake, like when you screwed up fourfold that one time.
Fourfold, yeah.
But today's a little different. We're not talking BFR. I know, weird, strange, but we're talking. This is more important, I think, than BFR. And so we're doing our Memorial Day podcast. Zach, if you guys don't know, is I never know. It's like you can't say former Marine because nobody's actually a former Marine. What's the correct thing to say?
Was in the Marine Corps. That's the one thing. There's
in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, so that's the Marine Corps has some interesting things, I would say, in general. Now, with knowing that I am a Marine, you can take this with a bit of bias and whatnot. But either way, the Marine Corps prides itself in its history. I would say we are the only branch that fully celebrates its birthday. It's basically, it is right around Veterans Day, but either way, if it wasn't, that would be a holiday in the Marine Corps. It is a huge birthday celebration. Kyle, you would love it. It turns into a drunken fiasco.
Yes.
A lot of free booze is flowing. And I would say this, that every single Marine can tell you when the birth date of the Marine Corps is.
Nobody's missing that. It's not like that is anniversary. You're not.
That's right. In fact, that's one of those things, like when you take a test in boot camp, that is on the test.
So I love. There's all those little things, where it's like this is just always going to be on there.
Yeah. That's not even something you have to prep for. By default that is on the test.
You accidentally write the Marine Corps birthday instead of the date of the test.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is they'll say, like, the Marine Corps is older than the country itself, and Another just ironic little tidbit, before we get into this, the Marine Corps is probably also unique in the sense that it was actually created in a bar in Philadelphia,
Yes,
called Ton Tavern.
I actually knew that. I actually
Yeah.
knew that.
So
I have a funny story that to me really kind of embodies kind of the general, I don't know if the right word is attitude that Marines have about being in the Marine Corps, but so as you know, my grandfather was a Marine, served in World War II. One of my grandfathers was, and then one of my uncles was a Marine Corps helicopter pilot, and so he flew the 53, that huge, that huge one. And I've actually seen those in the air, and it is intimidating to see one of those in the air and be kind of close because they're so big. But my cousin, he tells this story of how when he was a kid, he was talking to his dad about being in the Marine Corps because his dad was still in the Marine Corps at the time. And he said to his dad, Dad, did you ever think about becoming a sniper? Because my cousin, because you're a kid, guns are kind of cool, and you hear about snipers, it's kind of cool. And he says his dad looked at him straight away, and he goes, "Son, I was in the Marine Corps. We were all snipers." And to me, that just I hear so many little comments like that from older Marines. If I can seasoned Marines.
That is another thing that you will commonly hear from people. Every Marine is a rifleman, and that's another thing that they pride themselves on is things may have changed, but when I was in, it was basically once a year you had to qualify on the rifle range with your M16, and that was just the one thing that the Marine Corps really prided itself on was marksmanship. And then that extends into the sniper community as well. But yeah, for sure. It's definitely.
It always makes me laugh. So anyway, Zach, let's get into this a little bit. You and I, as I kind of introed, we had a couple different conversations. One around Memorial Day and kind of what it was. And I just didn't know. And so you were kind enough to enlighten me. And then also, I think one of the things that it's been cool to see you do over the past maybe like 2 or 3 years. I feel like you've been doing this where, you've been sharing kind of really on your Facebook profile, because you can't really share anywhere else like this, but sharing stories of former service members that have died in service to our country. And in the end, that's what Memorial Day is all about. And you may remember, I don't remember what prompted it. We were talking off air, but we somehow kind of got to talking about how these stories should be told, and we just don't, there's too many stories out there of people that have died in service to our country that we don't know the story. And some of them are not all that heroic. Some of them are heroic, but regardless, I think, if you died serving our country and keeping our freedoms, I feel like we should know your name and we should know your story. So, I don't remember how that conversation got going. Do you remember exactly kind of how it?
Yeah, I don't remember. I think, things become like a blip on the radar almost when, you hear of someone getting the Medal of Honor and things like that. And then that kind of will create like a little bit of a headline or something, but then it just kind of goes away. And a lot of times, so for anyone who doesn't know, Medal of Honor, that award is earned, not given. That's a pretty big distinction with folks. Folks aren't given the Medal of Honor. They earn the Medal of Honor. And, a lot of times that's years removed from when that act was performed that caused them to earn the Medal of Honor. So a lot of times it's just, like I said, it's kind of a blip on the radar, and, nothing's really done with it.
And sometimes
one
it's not given or not earned necessarily. I mean, and I've heard stories of how in some ways it'd be a burden to guys because they become kind of this political figure. At
Right.
times things are expected of them that maybe, it's like, man, I just did this thing for my country and now you want all this other from
Yeah.
me, this wasn't enough kind of thing.
Yeah. You
Right.
get, there's definitely numerous reports, of individuals who do an act that is very deserving, but yet what they're awarded or what they're given in response to that act is not really, it's kind of below what was actually the act that was performed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can definitely be frustrating for guys because the situation that that was involved is a lot of times a very sentimental kind of a thing, and they feel that what was done was very deserving, but then what is given in response to that is
Right.
not. So
Well, and you'll tell the story here in a little bit about a couple guys that we, really, and I would agree, I feel are deserving of the Medal of Honor, but since they're gone, who do you give it to? You don't have someone to parade around and say, here's our Medal of Honor recipient, because these guys are gone. And so I think maybe sometimes, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's not given posthumously. Is that the correct term? Posthumously, meaning essentially posthumously, after this person has essentially, these people are gone. There's not an actual person that did this thing to pin this medal on. And it should be given posthumously.
Yeah. The other thing too is when you specifically are talking about the Medal of Honor, there's a huge investigation that goes into that.
Uh-huh.
And so, so they will investigate that thing fully to make sure that, what has been worked up so far is not fictitious or exaggerated. They want to make sure that basically the actions that were carried out were the actual actions that were carried out. And so
it's cool. I think that's neat,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in the one instance that we'll talk about here later on is the only witnesses that there was some video footage, but the only witnesses, the eyewitnesses, were all Iraqis. And so from a political standpoint, it becomes a bit of an issue if you're strictly relying on, a foreign entity to kind of corroborate the story. So that creates a bit of a challenge.
Right. So let's back up a little bit because we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. You went into the Marines like right out of high school. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was that kid in high school that had no desire to go to college. I was probably the most anti-college kid that you will find. All I wanted to do ever since I really could remember.
It makes me laugh right now because I know the wormholes you go down looking into VEGF.
It's so ironic that now I will like half jokingly tell this story too. Dude, when I was in high school, all I cared about was playing sports. And if I had grades good enough to play sports, whatever, I was good. In fact, a couple kind of funny stories were when we would sign up in the spring for courses for the next school year, one of my electives was a study hall. And it wasn't so I could study. It was so I could get signed out and go hang out with the track coach.
Yeah.
And then my other elective would be an additional gym class. So I definitely was not your academic minded individual.
You weren't on the debate team?
No.
Or a mathlete or anything?
Yeah. So, and I remember too, my senior year in high school, we were sitting around, we were in math class and this is the spring. So everyone's like, talking about their SAT scores, and my math teacher goes, Dunkel, what'd you get on the SATs? I said, what are the SATs? I said, I just take the ASVAB. That's all I need to do. I get a certain score on the ASVAB and I'm good. So that was that was my mindset. Yeah, man, I remember too, you know, we were playing soccer. It was my senior year. The team was pretty decent for the area I grew up in. And, you know, we finished within.
I didn't know you were a soccer player. So that
yeah, we finished in like roughly the top 8 in the state of Pennsylvania. So we were playing this team in the state playoff from out around Pittsburgh. And one of the dads on the team, on this team from Pittsburgh, he comes over to my coach and he goes, man, he goes, you know, that number 5 out there is probably the only kid that could play at a Division I school. He goes, he's probably the only kid that has the ability. And my coach goes, yeah, good luck. And he goes, what do you mean? He goes, dude, that kid's going to the Marine Corps and you're not changing his mind. He goes, what? He goes, yeah, the kid's going to the Marine Corps. He goes, what a waste. And so, you know, and so that was
what a waste.
That was that, man, dude. I literally,
What position did you play? I feel like you were like a stopper or a sweeper guy.
Yeah. So I initially, when I was younger, I played striker, and then and when I was older, I played defense. But then I would just like make these. I would make these runs, like, so I would go from like the defensive end of the field and just take the ball and go down to the other end of the field, you know, and these people would just be like they would like blowing away, like, what's this kid doing? Yeah. So that was that, you know, but then, you know, getting into kind of the military, and where I am now, I will say, and I tell people this all the time with 100% confidence, that it was the Marine Corps that got me where I am today. And it was specifically Scout Sniper School. You know, up until that time, whether I was lazy or I was, you know, dumb, whatever, I don't really know. When I was in high school, like I said, I definitely wasn't motivated enough. I didn't care about academics enough to excel in that. But it was when I went to Scout Sniper School and the challenges of Scout Sniper School, that, you know, really, I proved to myself that I was able to do whatever I wanted to do, as long as I put my mind to it. And so, you know, it's probably weird for, you know, people in academics or within the clinical setting of, like, say, a physical therapy or anyone with a higher degree. A lot of times, you know, like, physical therapists are really proud of the schools that they went to or the degree that they have, like a doctorate in physical therapy, for example. I will tell you this, my greatest accomplishment in life is graduating from Scout Sniper School. I have, you know, no doubt in my mind that, you know, that was one of the greatest things that I'll ever accomplish in my life.
Yeah, that's cool. I believe that. We see you go down these wormholes, and I've said to Johnny and Ben, you know, because sometimes we are like marvel at it, like, how does he even, like, I don't understand all these lines and dots and arrows and crap, and Zac understands that crap. And I'm like, I really feel like it's the sniper training, honestly. And we've never talked about that, but I've actually said that because I feel like you have to be so detailed, you know, with
it's all about the
drift and all that stuff. I feel like maybe that's where it came from.
It is the detail, you know, the detailed role of things that I think, I don't know. I definitely get caught up in the details, and, you know, and obviously in the military, it's a different thing, but, you know, the details can save your life. And maybe translating that to what we do, I think the details are important because it may not be life-saving, but if I can connect the details, I can make sense of this. And if I can make sense with it in the context of this over here, maybe I can translate that and apply that over here, or if it makes sense to use that over here. But yeah.
Well, and I think you do a good job of kind of keeping things in context within a clinical context. When you start going, so many people get so detailed when they start looking at things that they forget, you know, they kind of forget the forest for the trees, if you will. And One thing that you're good at is getting into the weeds on this, but at the same time, really kind of keeping it in context.
Yeah,
I feel
it's
like
got to make
sometimes I have
sense.
to be the voice of reason, like a little bit, and I have to bring you down to earth just a little. Be like, whoa, Zach, hold on, man. Like,
Yeah,
I got lost
There's
here, buddy.
there's definitely those times where I'm like, I'm like in my mind, I'm like, this makes perfect sense, and Kyle's like, well, that's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, like, hang on,
Like
man.
I don't know, we don't have that yet, and I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah, but we got this over here that says this,
right,
yeah,
right.
yeah,
But it's fun to get excited about that stuff, and I think generally I enjoy talking about it. So, um,
yeah,
anyhow, that's us. There you go. So,
yeah.
so you join up, you sign on the dotted line. Do you actually sign a dotted line when you sign up to join the
No,
Marine
I think it
Corps?
was. I think it's a box. I think
Oh,
it's like
okay.
it's a blank box, and
Is it the signature like at the grocery store? Man, you can get out of that still probably.
I bet you nowadays it probably is. It's probably like all digital, like, hey, just
Yeah.
sign the iPad right here.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, when I went in, it was it's such a stereotypical government document that it's a regular sheet of paper, but then like they have a box. Yeah, it's then a big box, and then from in there within that box is like all these like separate little boxes that explain like different things. It's like an X that's
Yeah.
marked
Okay.
or whatever, and then you get down to the very bottom and it's like signature. And so yeah, and so going back to things, I pretty much enlisted as soon as I could. And in fact, the recruiter, I had known the recruiter, because they would come to the school and stuff.
Right.
I don't even think this guy really tried to recruit me. He knew. He knew that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
And so my main job that I wanted to do was become a reconnaissance Marine.
Okay.
And so that job was, similar to like your special operations type job. That was kind of the Marine Corps Special Operations Unit that they had. And since then, right when I was getting out of the Marine Corps in 2006, they actually stood up MARSOC, which was Marine Special Operations Command, which they pulled recon Marines from. But either way,
I appreciate you explaining the abbreviations there. By the way,
that's right. That's the other. So that is the other thing too that the Marine or the military is known for is these little mnemonics.
All the abbreviations.
So that's really what I wanted to do. Like I said, I enlisted the summer prior to 9/11. So it was roughly June of 2001. I enlist. I was 18 at the time, so I didn't need anyone to sign off. I literally just went by. Well, my mom knew I was going, but I went and signed up, whatever. And then I get home and I tell her like, hey, like I have a tentative ship date for boot camp, and it's such and such a date. It was going to be prior to graduating from high school. And my mom goes, no, you're graduating high school. Are you serious? And I said, Mom, dude, this is the military, man. There's going to be plenty of graduations. I said, it'll be fine. I'll leave a little early. It'll be no big deal. And she goes, no, you need to change the date. So I changed the date and left a little bit later, a couple weeks after graduating high school. So for anyone who knows or maybe doesn't know, the Marine Corps has two what they call recruit depots. Those things are one is in South Carolina at a place called Parris Island. No one has ever been to Parris Island that is not in the Marine Corps. They've been maybe to the island that's kind of right across from that, which is Hilton Head. Very nice vacation destination.
There you go. You can see the golf courses in the distance.
Yeah. So, and what's funny is like, if you ever talk to a Marine, like they'll tell you, first of all, how you get to the island is via bus. There's no, like your parents aren't dropping you off. Like there's no goodbyes. You get taken there on a bus in the middle of the night. And as you're approaching the base, they tell you to put your head between your legs. because they don't want you to see the road in. So it's because they don't want you escaping. So you have no idea. You're literally head between your legs rolling into the recruit depot. And then the next thing you know is you pull up beside this building, and I think it was on the Discovery Channel. This is years ago. They would have, what it takes, like making a Marine or something like that. And you'd have this drill instructor just gets on the bus and immediately just starts yelling, and the chaos ensues from there.
Yeah.
One of the very, famous things every Marine knows is the yellow footprints. So they pull up the bus, and then this guy's drill instructor gets on the bus and says, get on my yellow footprints right now. And it just starts from there, and you just kind of go from there. And then the other recruit depots out in San Diego, again, another Marine Corps thing. When you talk to Marines, real Marines are made on the East Coast. Out in San Diego on the West Coast, they just go to baseball games. They go to the Padres games when the Padres were still in San Diego. So yeah, that is another thing. If you ever come across a Marine, they will tell you that
one of those San Diego Marines.
That's right. They're called Hollywood Marines. They're allowed to go to baseball games, wear sunglasses, the whole 9 yards.
My God.
Yeah,
I love it. That's too funny. The yellow footprints, my experience with yellow footprints is going through the airport. Every dang weekend, the damn TSA agent. Put your feet on that. Okay.
Yeah. Get on the yellow footprint.
Yeah. Been through this before. Here we go.
Right. You have anything in your pockets? No, this is not my first rodeo.
No, ma'am. It's just my driver's license. So
yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Oh my God, too funny. So, all right, man. Well, that's cool. So, get into this. Tell me, kind of on just being military veteran. Like when you think about Memorial Day versus Veterans Day, in your own words, kind of, how does that resonate with you? Like, where does it, where do you go with that?
I'd say Memorial Day is pretty tough. You battle two very unique feelings. One is the feeling that, you want to honor these people. And so you want to celebrate their death, but at the same time, you may say, well, you have a bit of a selfish feeling where you mourn. And it's pretty tough because I think it's hard to fully fathom the relationship that you develop with people that you could come from two completely different backgrounds in life. You could have a kid who was born, say, in Long Island or, to a very wealthy family versus a kid from Louisiana or a kid from like extremely rural parts of Florida, and what have you. And you bring them together and they become brothers. And they become brothers in the sense of through training, you go through the exact same training together. And then when you deploy, you put your life in their hands and then he puts his life in your hands. And so it's pretty tough then when guys don't make it back. That's kind of Memorial Day. And it's a day of remembrance for people who really have, we were joking around before when you sign the dotted line, so to speak. Well, that dotted line is a check. And the payment is left blank, but it includes up to including your life.
Yeah.
And those guys on Memorial Day, we honor them because those are the guys that check was filled out. The American people and the government, they cashed that sucker out, and they're no longer with us. Veterans Day is a day to honor the veterans who have fought and made it back. We were fortunate enough to kind of come back. And then you have another day in May too, which is Armed Forces Day, and that's really to celebrate the folks who are still in the military and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of the rundown of those, kind of holidays. 2 to 3 those holidays that we celebrate. And I would definitely Memorial Day is probably the toughest.
Yeah. Well, and we say celebrate because there's just not another word for it. I don't know what else to use, but celebrate seems like the wrong word in many ways to me at this point. So,
Yeah, I would say it's tough because I think, like I said, I think from, from one context, you do want to celebrate them and kind of,
Mhm.
toast them, honor them and things
Yeah.
like that. But then there's also a selfish side of it that you want to mourn them because,
Yeah.
it's not right. It's not fair. But those guys, they have made the eternal sacrifice, and, they completed their duty. And so, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think it's something that goes away either. I mean, is it getting any easier year after year? Just as these thoughts kind of come up about buddies that
No,
you've lost and that kind of thing.
no, it's tough. Like I was writing up kind of an outline for this,
Hmm.
and there was numerous emotional times
Yeah.
where you writing this up, and you go through like each person, and you don't necessarily go to, say you don't just think about when they died, but you think about all the other events, right? And,
Yeah.
like, for instance, one of the guys was my roommate, prior to leaving. And,
Hmm.
we same group. He was just in a different team. He was my roommate before we left. He died in Fallujah. So,
Yeah.
it's stuff like that.
Well, I think for me, that's kind of why I wanted to do this, is because, like, I'm not here to, I don't want to hear all these awful stories about how people died. I mean, I think that's an important context, especially in some regard, but there's more to someone's life than how they died. I kind of want to hear about the person. We want
Yeah.
to kind of hear their story told. And in talking about this, you were reminding me of something that I don't remember if you said it or if I said it, about how, it's not really two deaths, right?
That's right. Whenever we talk about, these guys dying, we say that there's a passage that says a warrior actually dies twice. Once is when his heart stops and his spirit moves on to his next adventure. And the second is arguably probably more tragic than that, but it's when his story is no longer told, and it was told for the last time. His
Yeah.
memory, lost to the pages, his song no longer sung. Memorial Day weekend, we need to do more than remember. We need to tell the stories of our brothers, our sisters, the people who are no longer with us. We need to tell their stories, raise toast to them,
Yeah.
and so we can honor them and allow the echoes, to basically reach them in their well-earned rest, pass the legacy on to the next generation, so that it's never going to perish. It'll always be with us.
Yeah.
And whether it's us, whether it's my kids, or their kids, like whoever, we need to pass this on, so we know the sacrifices that these folks have made.
Yeah.
We need to live it out loud, speak them up, and let these legends never die.
Yeah. Yeah. Because stories have a cool way of living on. That's for sure. I mean, we all have stories from childhood and whatnot, and I think, there's stories that we don't know that we just need to hear. And so I think, if a small little plug, because we want to do this year after year. I mean, we're going to hear kind of about some folks that you served with, and some stories that about, but I think if people are listening to this and they have lost a family member, service member, served, in the military, and they want to come on and tell the story, or they want to send the story to us for us to tell, then we want to try to help do that in some way,
Yeah.
whatever it is, so that, because we can put this out there and it can just kind of live on, and people can listen to it whenever they have time. So we want to try to, that's kind of why we're doing this, is we want to try to help be part of that, help those. I think you said that, that their story will just echo, and kind of live on forever. So that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So, um, kind of talking about my, my experience, is, the lead up to the deployment that I went on was in the spring of 2004. I was still in sniper school at the time, and we had a group of contractors from Blackwater that their convoy got ambushed, and so what had happened was their convoy gets ambushed, and from there they were murdered and drugged through the streets of Fallujah, and burned and then hanged from the bridge over the Euphrates in Fallujah. And basically at that point in time, Fallujah was a bit of a no-go zone. I mean, it was kind of being built up, and it was a huge center for the insurgency in Iraq. And it was one of those things, that don't you just be careful with what you do. And kind of the government mentality was let things go as long as there was no outright attacks on coalition forces. It was kind of the attitude of, F around and find out type of a deal. Well, the insurgency effed around, and it was time for them to find out. So what happened was this kicked off the initial invasion into Fallujah. This is the first battle. They sent groups of Marines in from Camp Fallujah, which was basically roughly 3 kilometers on the southwest side of the city, or southeast side of the city, and went in there. This occurred at the beginning of April. All in all, was done by the end of April. Signed an agreement with the Iraqi police that said, look, man, this is your job. This is your responsibility to keep these nut jobs from coming back in here. So from there, pulled back out. Well, like a lot of other things in military history, once we pull out, we create a pretty big vacuum. And what then ensued over the summer was that city was fortified with insurgents and munitions. And then that led up to the deployment that I went on. We deployed right after Labor Day, 2004. And Fallujah at that time was a very dangerous area. We couldn't even go anywhere close to the city. There was roadside bombs on kind of the exit ramp, if you will. The way the city was laid out was you have an interstate system that's running north and south, and then you have another interstate system that would be running kind of east and west through the city. Well, if you got off anywhere in right outside of Fallujah, we call it the clover leaf. And those were the entrance and ongoing ramps onto the interstate system. Those things were laced with roadside bombs. You would go there and you would just get annihilated. And so things just were left to kind of alone. And then leading up to November, which November was the push into it was called Operation Phantom Fury. Leading up to that, our base, like I said, it was about 3 kilometers on the southeast side of the city. We would get mortared every single day. We would get incoming, typically around like 3 in the afternoon. You would hear the alarms go, and then you would hear the rounds impact. And it's pretty weird what you get used to. It's literally like, oh, it's another mortar attack today, type of a deal. And so, from there we operate and we're doing things. And we're just waiting because we knew it was, it's kind of like, for anyone on the East Coast or in the North that's familiar with a snowstorm and you're in school, right? It's like, everyone hears the whispers of like, hey, it snow's coming. We're going to get out early. There's going to be a snow day, like whatever. And you just kind of get this sense of excitement. That was kind of what we were dealing with was we knew Fallujah was coming. And we knew during our 7-month deployment, we were going to Fallujah. It was a matter of time. It was just, when is it actually going to happen? And so the end of October, the beginning of November, we do some things with our snipers on the outside of Fallujah. And then the beginning of November, I want to say it's November 5th. November. Yeah, right around like November 5th. We formally kick off Operation Phantom Fury. And then from there, things just kind of got bad for us. We on November 13th, we were conducting basically we set up a patrol base with our vehicles. It was myself and another my spotter. We kicked out into a sniper hide And then shortly thereafter, we have a patrol that goes out from the patrol base, just kind of like walking through a village. And, I'm set up in the quote unquote guardian angel when I'm just watching over the patrol. Nothing really happens on the patrol. One of the members of the that was attached to us was an engineer, and this engineer had a metal detector, and his main job was to find either buried munitions, arms, or IEDs. Mm-hmm. And so they make their way back to the towards the patrol base, getting ready to kind of wrap things up, and we find an IED roughly about 50 meters from the patrol base. Or we find the metal detector goes off, so we get a hit on the metal detector. We start kind of digging up around it, and we find it's an IED. It's kind of a pipe bomb. And at that point in time, I'm basically keeping eyes on the village because the majority of the IEDs were what we call command detonated, meaning that you had to have someone initiate the explosion. So it wasn't like a pressure plate or things like that where you step on it, step off, and it goes off. A lot of the IEDs in Iraq, that's exactly it. So a lot of the IEDs that were going off or that were being detonated were either attached to a cell phone or attached to a two-way Motorola walkie-talkie. And what happens, just in very general simplistic terms, when you have a plastic explosive, say C4, for example, you need an electrical charge for that, really. Mm-hmm. And so what they would do is they would attach a wire to the cell phone, and then the other end of it would go into the plastic explosive. And so from there, all they had to do was call that cell phone. And as soon as it lit up, that was enough of an electrical charge, it detonated the IED. The same thing would happen with a two-way Motorola. Literally keying the handset, literally just pressing the push to talk feature would be enough of an electrical charge to set off the IED. We find this IED. Like I said, I'm still looking at the village, looking for anyone who potentially has a cell phone or is kind of has the ability to detonate this thing. Not seeing anything. I happen to look over to where these guys are, and the next thing I know is the IED goes off. And one of the things that happens is it's hard to kind of fathom and say, like, well, what do you do in that moment? And you have to remain calm because a lot of times these IEDs were used to initiate an ambush. And what I would say about the insurgency is you have a lot of respect for those people that fight us, because they fight a war that they think they can win. And what that means is they won't outright engage us. They know that they don't stand a chance on the battlefield with the Marines or with the U.S. military. But they take advantage of moments of weakness, or when they think that they can get a tactical advantage. And so creating a very catastrophic event such as an IED is enough to do that. And so, like I said, this thing was roughly 50 meters from where we had our vehicles set up. There were 7 Marines that were surrounded by this IED. My platoon sergeant, Javier Oblais, immediately gets on the radio, basically setting up security. Hey, like, we need to get eyes out. Did anyone see anything? We need a head count right now. We need a head count. Well, the head count comes up and we're missing 2 guys. One of the guys was a guy by the name of Jack Dempsey, or Kevin Jack Dempsey. He was probably the closest to the IED and did not make it. He died a pretty catastrophic death. The other guy that died was a guy by the name of Justin Ellsworth, and that was our engineer that was attached to us. He was the guy who found the IED, and no one knew where he was at. And when I had looked over that way, right as the IED was going off, I see basically Justin flying through the air like he was punted like a football. And so I go from my position over to him, and we immediately, I called the corpsman over, and we're trying to just render some battlefield aid to this guy, but without getting too graphic, he basically, his torso was separated from his legs, because of the explosion. And so we try the best that we can, probably for a good 15 to 20 minutes, but he ultimately died right there. Um, and that was literally roughly 6 days into Operation Phantom Fury. And that's the one thing too that I always point out when we talk about, in the course. We talk about that line graph, that looks at like the injury severity rate and the fatality rate, right? And we see from 2005 onward to 2013 is what the graph looks at. And we see that the fatality rate significantly drops off, but the severity rate of these injuries significantly increase. Yeah. And I always point out, and I always tell people, this is real significant because this is when the IEDs became extremely effective for the insurgency, at least specifically in Iraq, in the early parts and prior to Fallujah. So in the earlier parts of 2004 and prior to that, IEDs were kind of like fireworks. They either didn't go off or they were more like a light show. They weren't really effective at all. But we had some different influences, specifically Syrians, that moved into the area. So this area of Fallujah, which was called the Al Anbar province of Iraq. We had these Syrians move in, and they really tweaked the manufacturing of these bombs, and they became extremely effective. And so, that's what we see really kicking off into Fallujah, and that led into, and so what makes things really tough. And we were talking about the difference between Veterans Day and Memorial Day. What makes things tough in the military is we're conducting combat operations. We don't have time to pause. And so that happened on November 13th. On November 14th, I was ambushed on the Euphrates. So, we just had a pretty significant event that happened the day before, and we're back at it the next day.
You mean they didn't give you a load management day?
No, we did.
There wasn't a thing. You didn't just get to decide to take the day off.
Yeah, it's crazy that how things are looked at, and you had a rough day, go ahead and take a day off. Yeah. We were in the midst of Fallujah, and subsequently Fallujah is considered the bloodiest battle of Iraq. For all American forces, there's a lot of bloodshed in Fallujah, and there was no time to mourn these deaths. I can just an offshoot just to paint the picture of Fallujah and what it was like was we had grunt units, and so the grunts are the infantry, so we had these grunt units that were going in and going house to house through Fallujah. And like I said, we had been doing mail droppings leading up to Fallujah. Basically said, look, man, dude, we're coming into the city. We're not telling you when. We're going to come into the city relatively soon. So if you're not a combatant, you need to leave. So we gave people plenty of warning. And then it also, you could say, well, you gave people warning that you're coming, so we're just going to fortify it even more. Yeah. And so, what we would do is you would literally, go into a building, stack up on a building. A lot of times that building was rigged with IEDs. And so basically, as soon as you open the door, that trips the IED, bam, wipes out a team. The other thing that would go on too was you would stack up on a room, you would make entry, however you did that, they would have a machine gun nest in the corner of the room. So basically, and aimed in on that door. And as soon as that breach was made, or as soon as entry was made in that room, they were lighting up that doorway. Mm-hmm. And it got to the point where, people may have heard of like using flashbangs and things like that. Whatever. No, we
I've
just
seen it on
straight up.
TV.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
TV and Call of
Yeah.
Duty.
Yeah. I've seen it.
um,
I'm not a
so
video gamer guy. I don't
yeah,
do that, but I've seen it
yeah,
on
yeah.
TV.
So either way, there was in Fallujah, there was no really using flashbangs. You straight up just use a chunk of C4 and you throw that sucker in the room, goes off, make entry. And so it was nuts. These people, like I said, they fought a war and they would fight the way that they thought they could win.
Yeah.
And so that was Fallujah and whatnot. And then, as November continued on, things were still kind of getting pretty dicey. And then November 25th rolled around. And that was a Thursday. And, these folks, like I've said, I mean, I can't say it enough. They fight the war they thought they could win, and they use some pretty unique tactics. The IED was one of the most effective, and they would use different tactics to employ the IED because Americans, we're pretty good. Like we can notice things are out of the ordinary, but the military members, and so you can't just dig up a hole along the side of the road and say that, and then put on a bomb and cover that up. I mean, it leaves some fresh dirt, right?
Yeah.
So you're like, it's out of the ordinary, like something's going on here.
Yeah.
So what they would do is sometimes litter was a huge issue in Iraq. So it wasn't out of the ordinary to see like some litter, some garbage along the side of the road, whatever. Right. So what they would do is they would sometimes dig a hole, put a grain sack over the bomb. And then from there, just leave the grain sack there, maybe lightly cover up the dirt, whatever, or cover up the hole with dirt. And then from there, set off the IED. The other thing that they would do would be literally take dead animals. And so they would take a dead goat or dead sheep, cut up the carcass, and pack a bomb in the dead animal. And so on November 25th, what happened was we were driving down the road, and there was a dead animal along the side of the road. And we had gotten reports up until this point, like, hey, this could be a tactic for these folks. So, and knowing the lethality of the IEDs, we called EOD out, which EOD is explosive ordnance disposal. You can think of them as the bomb squad, so to speak. That's a bomb squad. So we called the bomb squad out, and they have like a little robot device with a camera and some arms. And so from there, we ran that the robot up to where the animal was, and we could certainly see wires coming out of this animal, which is pretty unique. A lot of dead animals don't have wires coming out of them.
Yeah.
So at that point in time, we brought the robot back, had some C4, then took the robot back up there, set the plastic explosive on the animal, set the charge, detonated it. So we detonated one IED that day. EOD leaves. They get like they're gone maybe for like a minute or two. So they're just right down the road. Another explosion goes off. EOD was hit with an IED that day. So that's the second IED. And so the day continues, I mean, it's like, again, like we just continue on with what we're doing, right? I mean, we got a mission to carry out. We're going to carry out the mission. And so
Mike, I learned that recently. Charlie Mike.
Yeah. And so, so it's getting close to the afternoon or late into the afternoon. And we decide like, hey, like we're just going to pass some time. We're not going to really drive too much more during the day because of all the stuff we've seen and dealt with, the 2 IEDs already today. We're just going to wait until it gets dark. And then we're going to move to where 3rd platoon was at, which is a sister platoon. And we're going to, kind of meet up with them. And so to pass time, we took our snipers and we set up on the Euphrates. Nothing like too sneaky, anything like that. It was really just more of a show of force of like, hey, we're here, whatever. Well, within probably 20 to 30 minutes, we had about 15 to 20 cars that pull up on the other side of the Euphrates. They back in, and now the insurgents are doing their own show of force. And we had this old-fashioned standoff where here we are completely exposed, and then we have no idea what's going on in these other vehicles. They just show up and they're just watching us just like we're watching them. And at that point in time, it's getting dark. And then, roughly maybe like 20 minutes after this kind of standoff, they just pull out and leave. And I think the reason why they left is because they could see our vehicles in the background. And so we had what we in the military we call heavy guns. So heavy guns are is a 50 cal machine gun and a Mark 19. Both of those are fully automatic. And so, the 50 cal is pretty devastating when it goes off. And then the Mark 19 is, fully automatic grenade launcher launching grenades at you. So at that point in time, we definitely would have the upper hand relatively quickly. And so they drive off, and we don't think much more of it. We're like, okay, whatever. Now it's getting dark. We're packing up. We're moving on. Right as it was dusk, transitioning into dark, we're driving down the road. IED goes off. Hit third vehicle in the convoy. Everybody in that convoy, except for one person, got a Purple Heart out of it. The driver lost his leg, and my platoon sergeant Javier Oblais, actually he was mortally wounded in that explosion. And a couple things about Javier. This guy was he was pretty close to me. He was the main reason. He was the guy that got me into sniper school. And it's always funny, sometimes you look back and you're like, at some of the things that you were able to do or go to, or opportunities that were provided for you. And you're like, man, how did I ever get that opportunity? And I always look back and I'm like, there's times where people see things in you that you don't even see in yourself. Mm-hmm. And that was the thing with Gunny Oblais. I don't know if he went out on a limb for me, but he definitely, that was the reason I got to sniper school. Up until that point in time in Iraq, the guy took me under his wing. He would, whenever we would do sniper things, like he was a sniper as well. He and I would go out together and he would just work with me. He would teach me things. So, we get hit. And even, with that, similar to what happened, roughly 12 days before when the IED went off, here's this guy who's in charge, mortally wounded. He starts calling, setting up security. He's worried about other guys in the vehicle, not himself. He tells the corpsman specifically, you need to go attend to these other guys. And from there, setting up security, making sure that everything is set up, because one of the things that we knew was, again, like these IEDs were used to launch larger attacks. And what was significant about this specific attack was it was the third vehicle in the convoy. So what that meant was it basically separated the convoy. We have two vehicles in the front, two vehicles in the back. And now, so that limits what you're able to do. That basically paralyzes that convoy, because you can't get around the down vehicle that was blown up. So you have two vehicles in the front that all they can do is really go forward. And to put this further into perspective, the road system over there is elevated. And so, the road is built up, and then it has big berms that go off. And these berms are probably in the ballpark of between 8 to 10 feet high. So, the road is up and then it drops off into the farmland.
Not like you just go around.
Yeah, it's not like, there's a shoulder and then we just kind of skirt the shoulder. No, there's no way to go around. So literally the convoy is paralyzed. If we get hit right now, we have to stay and fight. And that goes against like one of the, when you're in an ambush, or how you defeat an ambush is you push through the ambush. You actually attack into the ambush. You have to get out of the kill zone. But in this situation, you can't get out of the kill zone. You're there. And so we call QRF, which is a quick reactionary force. And we have security set up, and we're just waiting. And you know, this at this point in time, it's completely dark. You're sitting there. We got our one guy would have literally bled out, that became the amputee if we didn't put a tourniquet on him. So we have that we're dealing with as well. And then 4 other guys in the vehicle that are seriously wounded. And we finally get them extracted. We get the QRF out there. We get them medically extracted and then back to where we were at. And then when it comes to Javier, he was stabilized and then taken to Germany. And what was going on in the context of all this was we felt pretty down about it because he took some shrapnel to his eye. And he lost his vision. We knew relatively quickly that he was going to be blind in one eye. And it was pretty significant because, you know, his goal that he had told some of us leading up to this was once we get back, he was going to try out for Delta. So Delta Force. And we're like, well, dude, like that sucks, man. Like, dude, he's basically done. He's going to be either forced to medically retire or he'll have a permanent restrictions on his job. He's going to be, you know, he's not doing the same job that he's doing now. Right. And then, you know, that was the 25th of November. On 12/1, he died. He basically, a piece of shrapnel went through his eye and was lodged in his brain. It caused increased swelling in the brain and a subsequent infection. And he ultimately ended up dying from there. So that was pretty much November, and you know, kind of the losses that we sustained there. And then
if I remember, Zach, I mean, I think you told me a story too about Javier where, I mean, basically you were pinned down and he saved your life. Isn't that right?
That's right. Same? So yeah. that was the ambush fault the day after the initial, that first IED that I talked about with Dempsey and then Justin Ellsworth. And so we were on the Euphrates, and it was a complete, it was just a fluke sort of thing in a couple ways. You know, we set up, I took 3 other guys with me this time and to set up a sniper hide. We set up a sniper hide on the Euphrates. And so what was going on at that point in time with Fallujah was Fallujah was getting reinforced both with men and munitions from the other side of the Euphrates. And so the standing rules of engagement at the time was basically anybody crossing the Euphrates, that's a military combatant, fair game to engage. And so they wanted to set up our snipers and just basically to watch. And so we set up, and we were just watching things. And we had this vehicle on the road behind us. And so let me just back up and say we had the folks that we had with us I had with me at that time, had myself, I had a bolt action sniper rifle. And what that means is that's like think of it as a deer hunting rifle. So not a highly accurate, but you don't have a high volume of fire capabilities with that. And I had another guy with what was called a SAW, which is a squad automatic weapon. It's a fully automatic belt-fed machine gun. And then I had another guy with an M4, and the third guy that was with us had basically what's called a medium machine gun, and that was it was a 240, which means it shot a little bit bigger of a round. It was a 308 than what the SAW did. So I set that guy up pointing back towards the road, so no one would do a drive-by on us.
Yeah.
And the rest of us were focused across the Euphrates. There was a guy in an old Ford Bronco. It was a red Bronco, drove past us 3 times. very, very suspicious. Drove past us very slow, and then did it 2 more times. And, Alex, who was the 240 gunner, said like, "Hey man, like there's this guy driving past us, whatever." I said, "Just keep an eye on him, whatever." And then he does it 2 more times, and we make note of it. And then the next thing I know, roughly 10 to 15 minutes after he drove past us the last time, old boy ends up on the other side of the Euphrates. And basically what happened was he went over there and told him exactly what we were doing, where we were at. And they launched 3 males in a canoe. And I called it in and said, basically, "Hey, like, what do you want me to do?" And the folks at the patrol base said, "Well, we're going to send someone from the patrol base up there to intercept them." I said, "Nah, man." I said, "Dude, there's no time for that." I said, "These guys are hauling ass. It's literally like they're on the Olympic row team. I mean, they're not wasting time getting across this river." And I said, "I got 3 other guys up here." I said, "How about I just send two of those guys down to intercept them and see what's going on?" They're like, "Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead and do it." Well, and so we had 2 radios with us. One was a larger radio, and the other one was called an M-Biter. It's kind of like, you can think of it as like a more high speed walkie-talkie. And I had the M-Biter, and I had a Camelback backpack with all my sniper ammo in. And so instead of taking the bigger radio, I gave these 2 guys my backpack with my radio that had my sniper rounds in. And as soon as I gave that radio, as soon as I gave that backpack up, I said, "I'm screwed. If something happens, I'm screwed, because I don't have any ammo now. I mean, besides what's in the gun.
It's in the rifle." Yeah.
And so they literally get maybe 10 feet from us, and they get up, they start running. They're 10 feet from us, and all you hear is commotion on the other side of the Euphrates. At that point in time, we start getting hit with heavy small arms fire. So small arms, AK-47. And they are pinned down. I'm pinned down. I start opening up on the sniper rifle. And then the guy who was with us, with Alex with the 240, he spins around and he's like, "Dunk, man, where are they at?" I said, "Dude, they are all over." And so he starts opening up on the 240. Largely in hopes of allowing to provide some suppressive fire to get these guys back. They're not out in the open. And so they come back. I get more rounds on my gun. And then, we get the guy with the saw, Chase. He opens up on that. And then Rose opens up. He has just start shooting with his M4. At this point in time, the folks on the canoe pop up from the Euphrates, up the embankment of the Euphrates. They popped up probably about 100 yards short of where we were. And I really think they misjudged where they landed and where we were at. And I think largely what was going on was the guys on the other side of the Euphrates was largely a distraction. And so they wanted to take our attention off of the canoe and place it on them, and then allow the guys from the canoe to pop up and basically just to ambush us even more from the river.
Right.
But that didn't happen. My buddy with Chase with the saw, he dumped about 200 rounds into where they popped up. So we emptied a whole belt into that area. And then we get on the radio, and we're like, "Hey, dude, man," I said, "we're taking heavy small arms fire up here. We need some support." And they're like, "Yeah, it's just stand by. Like, we're taking rounds in the patrol base." And I said, "All right." So 2 of us are pinned down right now. And what had actually ended up happening was there was ricochets from the rounds that we were taking, the firefight we were in. Rounds were ricocheting, hitting back into the patrol base. And so that's the impacts they were taking. And so, but yeah, what Javier did, the thing that saved us that day was we typically never patrol with a 240 with the larger belt fed machine gun. Typically the only thing we would have with us would be the saw, which is the 5.56 or the light machine gun. He had the foresight to basically say, look, man, like let's take the 240 up there as well. And so that's what we ended up doing. And, ultimately that's really what kind of saved us, because once that 240 opened up, we kind of gained firepower superiority pretty darn fast, and kind of going from there. So, but yeah, that was that. And then, ultimately we come back, and then I had made the decision at that point in time to get out of the Marine Corps. And so I transitioned out of that unit, or not out of the unit, but out of the team, and started working with another group. And my unit redeployed then in March of 2006. And that's the other kind of thing too that I think gets lost a lot of times, are the sacrifices that these folks are paying. Not just the sacrifices of the military member, the service member, the war fighter, sacrifices of the family. And so the way that it worked for us was we would literally be on roughly 14-month rotations. So you would deploy for 7 months, you would come back, you would do then what we called a school phase, where you went on and did different schooling. Could be jump school, dive school, could be sniper school, advanced sniper, whatever type of school, but you do a school phase. From there, you go right into a workup and get ready for your next deployment. And so, roughly every 14 months, you're redeploying back out. So it's a pretty tough, kind of routine to keep up, especially for Afghanistan. You're looking at 19 and a half years we've been doing this. Iraq, roughly 18 years this has been going on. And so from there, I'm getting out. My group is getting ready to redeploy. And this is just a little bit of a funny story to kind of mix in here. But whenever guys in my unit get out, we have what's called a paddle party. And a paddle party is they take a boat paddle, or an oar, so to speak, and they decorate it. They put a very fancy wrap on it for the handle and whatnot. And then they'll give you a plaque with everything that you've accomplished while you're in the Marine Corps, or in reconnaissance and whatnot. And it ultimately, Kyle, you would love it, turns into another drunken fiasco.
Yeah. Yes.
It is nothing more than beer drinking, a drunken fiasco. And so, in fact, like typically it'll happen at a bar. There was one bar in Jacksonville, North Carolina, where Camp Lejeune is, that we typically would always frequent. It was called Ducks. And we would have they had kind of it wasn't fully outside. It was like a screened in outside deal. Mm-hmm. And the end of the party, we have a bit of a song called Brother Recon. And while you're singing Brother Recon, the guy who's getting out is chugging pitchers of beer. And that's what we do. So with all that being said, mind you, now, so this is a Thursday night. The guys are getting ready to deploy on Saturday. They're leaving Saturday. They're leaving the States, flying to Kuwait, Iraq Saturday. And so the other, going back to kind of things that people in the Marine Corps know about, everybody who's ever been a Marine knows what Thursday is. Thursday is what we call Field Day Thursday. Field day is basically when you clean your room. And we're not talking just kind of hitting high spots with dust and vacuum and stuff. No. Depending on the unit you're in, Friday morning, you have field day inspection. And they literally will walk through your room and they will look for things that aren't clean, aren't tidy. So Thursday night, the Thursday before the battalion is getting ready to leave, they decide, man, you know what? We're gonna have Dunkel's paddle party, since this is the last time everyone's gonna be around. And my one buddy, just to clue you in on this guy, I don't think he had a high school diploma. he had what he called the good enough diploma, which was the GED. And so again, you take a look at these people, the people who go into the military, you're like, a lot of times you're wondering, like, what drives these people? Well, the guy who has the good enough diploma. And so anyway, he goes to Chase, my buddy, who was, in the firefight I just, talked about. He goes to Chase. He goes, hey man, he goes, I want to, can I borrow your truck? I got to go get some stuff for Dunkel's paddle party. And so he's like, yeah, sure. Like, whatever, So he goes out where we lived in Camp Lejeune. It was close to what's called the back gate. So Camp Lejeune is huge. To get from where we live to the main gate would be roughly, it's like 45 minutes. So it's a huge military base. So we lived out the back gate, and there was a flea market, so to speak, out the back gate the place of business was called the Junk Lady. And so my buddy's like, dude, they got a couch at the Junk Ladies. I'm just going to buy this couch for Dunkel's paddle party. Right. So he comes back, has this couch loaded up in the back of this truck. And, we unload it and everything. And one thing leads to another as the night unfolds, and a fire gets started. And the duty now, like, this is the guy who's like in charge of this part of Camp Lejeune. Like, so what it's a place called like Courthouse Bay. So he's in charge of the entire Courthouse Bay area. And there's numerous units that are in Courthouse Bay. Okay. And he sees this fire. I mean, because you can see it across Courthouse Bay. So he comes over. And he's like, what in the F is going on here? Like, why is there a fire in the backyard, so to speak? And they're like, he goes, you guys need to figure this out. He goes, you need to put this fire out right now. I don't care how you do it. You get trash cans, whatever, fill them up in the shower, whatever you got to do, you need to put this fire out. So the fire gets put out, and then it's probably maybe like an hour later, gets relit. This time is larger. In fact, this time the couch is on fire, and guy comes back. And at this point in time, the fire department's called. And so I'm on like the third floor, and I'm looking at this, and I'm like, dude, this is not good. And the next thing you know, one of my buddies comes up, and the firefighters are there. And they're like, my buddy goes, I don't know why you're here. If we wanted that fire out, we'd piss on it and put it out. He goes, we want that fire lit. And so at this point in time, like, basically things are pretty well canceled at this point. And
paddle party over.
The paddle party is over. And so, the sergeant major is called. He shows up, and this is like 10, 11 o'clock at night. And he goes, everybody in the barracks, get the F out here right now and get in formation. And so we're like, all right, so we're standing there, yada, yada, yada. Like, things are going on. And he goes, now let me say this, the rules for the barracks in regards to alcohol, you were allowed one bottle of wine or 1 6-pack. No liquor was allowed.
Okay.
He goes, now it's my understanding you boys wanted to have a paddle party up here tonight. He goes, well, we're going room to room. Let me find alcohol in these rooms more than a 6-pack. Let me find that. He goes, we're also going through with the fire department, and we're getting fingerprints off the stuff in the fire back there, and we're running it. We're going to figure out who's in charge and who orchestrated all this. And so, we're standing out there, and it's literally probably close to midnight, 1 a.m. at this point. And everyone knows, we're like, dude, this there's going to be no
it's just a show.
Like, no, it's just a way for you to kind of entice us to like tell us, tell you like who's involved here. So, like good Marines, no one says a word. And then, so everything then is just, he goes, you guys, you're done. Just go to bed. got formation in the morning. And so Friday is always, like in the Marine Corps, Friday is always a battalion or larger level formation. So now the battalion commander has been briefed on all this. This is all my paddle party, right? But no one like knows it's me. They just know like there was going to be a paddle party. And so battalion commander, we thought was going to be pissed. But he turns out like being really cool about it. He goes, heard you guys wanted to have a good time last night. He goes, that's good. He goes, I'm okay with that. Because you know what? Come tomorrow, we got work to do. So he's like, I'm glad you guys got it out of your system. Like, I didn't even really care. And so, at that point in time, the guys I was with, really nothing went on Friday, day before we leave, or they left. And so Saturday they all leave. And then kind of within a matter of a couple of weeks, about a month, things got pretty real. A couple of my buddies, a guy by the name of Corey Palmer, who I went to sniper school with. He was in our unit, deployed with him the first time. His vehicle gets hit with an IED. And some of the tactics that the insurgents would use with their IEDs, they changed throughout the course of Iraq, or through the duration. They went from just simply using explosives to using explosives with an accelerant. And so a lot of times they would put gasoline in the with the explosive, like in a container, say a 2-liter bottle or something along those lines. Okay. And what that would do is, because at that point in time, like in the early phases of Iraq, I'm sure like some people will remember, dude, we were driving around Humvees that were like convertibles, no tops on them, no armor. And that created a lot of hysteria and a lot of attention with Americans. They're like, dude, what is going on? We've sent these guys over there, and we're literally having police departments send like old flak jackets and old bulletproof vest as a means of armor. Some of the deployment I was on, we literally had old flak jackets, old Kevlar vest lining the floors of the Humvees because of the risk that IEDs had. And it would be like the shrapnel once the IED went off from underneath the vehicle. And then we would also have Kevlar vest on like the door panels as well, to protect from shrapnel from blast from the side. And so, and then as Iraq went on, we had what we call up armor vehicles. And then there's another device or another vehicle made by Oshkosh. It was called an MRAD, which is basically a very up armored vehicle. And so either way, to exploit those weaknesses, though, we always had a gunner. And so he would be the guy manning the gun on top of the roof. Well, he's exposed, even though like we would have metal steel wrapped around him to protect him, it would still be an opening. So what they did was they would use these accelerants with their IEDs that would create a very big fireball. And so that fireball would go off, it would hit the gunner, and then it would just go out through the vehicle. So it would fill the vehicle with a huge ball of fire that would lead to very serious burns with people. Pretty catastrophic deal. So either way, like I said, just roughly 5 weeks into this 7-month deployment again, my buddy's vehicle gets hit. This was hit on May 1st, and everybody in that vehicle died, and at different times. Corey died on his way back to the States on the 6th of May, and then Alex Carbonero died on the 10th, and then Brad Falks died on the 18th. And so kind of what's ironic, with Johnny and what Johnny used to do was, and I always tell people about the burn center in Texas, right? Military guys and whatnot, when they go back and they're like, hey, so-and-so, they're going to the burn center in Texas. Well, the burn center is the Institute of Surgical Research at BAMC. Right. And so Corey,
which is just across the street from CFI.
Just across the street from CFI. And those guys work so closely with one another. Yeah. And So the way that evacuations work from in theater would be you leave Iraq. Once you're medically stabilized and able to do so, from there you go to Germany. Either you're managed in Germany and then you'll fly back or whatever, or we get you stabilized in Germany for a much longer flight back to the States. Largely guys were either going to Walter Reed or they were going to Texas. And Corey was on the flight to the Institute of Surgical Research and died on the flight. And so, it was those guys, and it's a pretty tragic loss, knowing that you're so close, but yet so far away. When he died, it was literally 4 days before his 22nd birthday. And that's the other thing too, that I would say, a large percentage of these guys that are dying, specifically in Iraq and Afghanistan, I'm sure it would hold true in World War II as well. But I just know specifically in Iraq and Afghanistan, these guys that are dying are young. And they have had they have a lot of life that has been left on the table. I would say they live their life to the most fullest extent that they can. And they have no regrets from that. But if you look at, basically how we look and cherish life, they had a lot of life left, but they were willing to sacrifice that for the greater good. So, in overall, in that deployment, there were 9 operators that died from my unit in that second deployment. And largely that came in the months of May and June of 2006. So, but yeah, that would, those are the folks I personally, know that have passed, and folks that I think about on a regular basis, that died and paid that sacrifice so that we have the freedoms that we so enjoy and love.
Yeah. I think it's cool. I appreciate you telling us these stories for sure. And I think too, when I think about Memorial Day, I think those stories are so important, but I think there's more to it than that, because it's, living with having lost those guys for you, their families, and all the other garbage that you see, in war. I mean, I think back just on my life, and having had 2 grandfathers, both served during World War II, and looking back and just thinking, how different our lives were simply because of that. I had 2 grandfathers that were not emotionally available, were very rough around the edges, and growing up as a kid, you think, these are just salty old guys, and at some level you kind of have an appreciation for cranky old dudes, because you grew up with a couple that you fished with and you hunted with and that kind of thing. But in hearing, I think one thing that is kind of unique for you, Zac, is that you're willing to talk about this stuff, and a lot of people aren't willing, or just simply aren't able. And I think in the case of some folks that have seen life lost, have been close to people that have died in combat, it's a very hard thing to talk about. And I don't think the pain of that goes away, really. You just kind of live with it in different ways. For my grandfather, at least the only story that I know, because in leading up to this, I asked my dad, my uncles, my cousins, do they know any stories that I could tell, from way back when, and the only story that's out there is my uncle, who a lot of people that have taken our course have seen a picture of him, because he was a bullpen catcher for the Astros for 36 years, since my devotion to the Houston Astros. And then my grandfather was a Marine, never saw combat, but he was in the Philippines, and a plane came in that the navigator was flying. And basically the navigator said to the person in in the air control tower who was telling them, look, you can't land, you can't land. The navigator's like, dude, I'm the only person alive on this plane. I'm landing this plane.
Yeah.
And so my grandfather, he got to help unload all of the dead Marines, Army servicemen, Navy personnel, whomever it was, from that plane. And my uncle one time asked him, he said, Pop, you don't get I don't see you get mad about stuff. I don't see you cry about anything. He goes, and he's like, my uncle is like, I'm an emotional wreck about some of this stuff. And I'm getting emotional just talking to you about some of this junk. And he said to my grandfather, he's like, I don't understand how you're so tough about this stuff. And my grandfather just looked him straight in the eye, and he was like, he basically told him that story. And he was like, son, I can still smell those bodies. He's like, no, I can't imagine anything worse than having to unload these people that I served with, that died for our country. So I think that, the pain it lives on in so many different ways. And so, excuse me, I get upset talking about it. So
yeah, it's it's tough for sure. You sit there and like I said, I think earlier on, is you try to not just think about the moments of the event that took someone's life, but you think about all the other things with them. And I would say that kind of helps, and go from there. But, definitely Memorial Day is different, for folks that have lost someone. But yeah. And then, one of the other things one of the other stories that I think is really important, back to, what we were originally saying was, getting the stories out there with people, and people who have done very heroic things, but they're just not really recognized. And this is, I don't know how popular of a story, but it happened in 2008 in Ramadi. And so Ramadi, second to Fallujah, was a very tough war zone. A lot of guys, major fighting after Fallujah occurred in Ramadi. And that was kind of like the big fighting for the Al Anbar province once Fallujah was kind of taken care of. And the story is told via General Kelly, and the name of the speech that he talks about it from is called 6 Seconds to Live. And what happened that led up to this was, you have two units that are on the verge of, or they're swapping out. And so whenever we do a swap out of units overseas, you have a bit of overlap. So within that overlap, you basically have the leaders, the commanders of those two units are discussing, the battlefield, so to speak, things that, the incoming group needs to be aware of and whatnot. And then you go on ride along type patrols. And then, basically there's a handoff. And so what was going on in Ramadi, this kind of happened in April 22nd of 2008. You have two infantry units. It was 1-9 and then 2-8. 1-9 was coming in. And so when we use like numbers like that in the Marine Corps, what that means is it's 1st Battalion, 9th Marine Regiment, and 2nd Battalion, 8th Marine Regiment. The 1-9 has a pretty notorious history. They're called the Walking Dead, and they're called the Walking Dead because of they have the highest mortality rate of any Marine Corps unit, and that was sustained in Vietnam. Leading up to kind of modern day, so to speak, 1-9 was, or 9th Marines was stood down, meaning they disbanded 9th Marines. Leading up to the troop surge in Iraq that happened in 2007, they restood up 1-9, or stood up 9th Marine Regiment. And so now 1-9 is on their first deployment. One of the Marines that and so let me back up. So they go on this deployment, and they literally just got in country, and they're staying at this compound. And so how security works in these compounds is Marines, if you're on a Marine base, Marines provide the security. They provide security for their own people. And so they have two guys on watch at the entrance to this compound. And then they have like what's called Jersey walls or T barriers. There's the concrete barriers that you see on the interstate and whatnot, like the median. They have those set up in a serpentine. So basically someone doesn't have a straight shot at running a vehicle into the compound. And so you have two Marines that are tasked with now taking over the security. So you have a change in security, one of which is Lance Corporal Jordan Harder from 1-9, and then you have Jonathan Yale from 2-8. These Marines, Harder was 20 years old and Yale was 22 years old. So again, two very young Marines, more than likely on their first, definitely Harder was on his first deployment. Yale, I believe was on his first term, his first enlistment. And again, just kind of within the Marine Corps, you're considered a boot until you go on deployment. So a boot is a newbie. And so you're a boot. And so what that also entails is whenever there's work duties, things like that, you're the guy who does those. The junior guy does that. Like it's a hierarchy,
You
right?
gotta pay your dues. Yeah,
that's right. You pay your dues. Yeah. So Harder gets basically picked from 1-9 to man the post. Yale from 2-8, the outgoing unit. They're like, basically they pick him. And so from there, it's, the standing deal. You have general orders in the Marine Corps. One of the general orders is basically to man the post, do not allow anyone to pass without proper identification and proper reason. So they're standing posts relatively shortly after they assume the post. They have some Iraqis that surround them. Within this compound, there was 50 Marines and 100 Iraqi police officers. So 150 men in this compound. And shortly after they assume post, there's a large blue truck that turns down the street. It starts weaving in and out of the serpentine, or, starts to navigate these Jersey walls. And it starts picking up steam. At this point in time, the Iraqis begin to figure out like what's going on. And so Harder and Yale start opening up fire. Once this happens, they start based off of security cam footage. The vehicle turns down the street. About a second, you figure you have about a second to process like what's going on, like what is actually this individual doing. They're navigating it. Then they start picking up steam. So you kind of have an idea of what's going on. At that point in time, you pick up your rifle. We'll say that takes another 1 to 2 seconds. So now we're 3 seconds into this. From then on, for 2 seconds, based off security cam footage, these guys are unloading. The Iraqis have already started to run. And so the Iraqis that are there, they know what's going on. They start running away to basically find cover.
They're basically like this truck is a bomb.
They know. And so Harder and Yale continue firing. They fire for, another 2 seconds. At this point in time, the truck, they basically killed the driver. The truck comes to a rest right in front of them. A second later, the bomb goes off. It was a relatively large bomb based off EOD assessment. They estimated the bomb was about 2 tons in size. It was so massive that it destroyed 24 brick masonry buildings in the area. There was a mosque that was 100 meters away that was destroyed. And so what's kind of ironic then is, so given what happened, and again, you take a look at this scenario, mind you, there's only two people who died in this instance. Mm-hmm. It was Harder and Yale. They saved the lives of 150 individuals and sacrificed their own life. They never once wavered. They didn't go to hide. They didn't run away. No, they shouldered rifles, leaned into it, and rained hate downrange on this individual to save the individuals that were behind them. And so from there, they interviewed General Kelly, went to Ramadi, and he interviewed the Iraqi police, because they were the only ones who saw what was going on. And all the stories were consistent across the board with everyone he interviewed. They once the truck made the turn down the street, they knew what was going on. They knew what it was. It started picking up steam. And so the Iraqis, they began to fire, but relatively quickly they're like, dude, this guy, he's not stopping. We need to run. And so they ran for cover, and they did so that they could live. And they did. And then one of the other individuals that was interviewed by General Kelly, said that they ran from the danger like any normal man would, to save their own life. But he didn't realize until at that point that Marines aren't normal. Yeah. No sane man would have stayed there and did what they did. They saved the rest of us. And that's what they do. We have a job, we have a duty, and whether that duty is to protect the flag and what that flag stands for, to protect America and what America stands for, or protect our brothers and sisters, that's what we will do. And again, the oath that is taken, when we take that oath to defend the Constitution, we do so. And we write a blank check to the government and to the American people with a value up to and including our lives. And the individuals that we talk about today, and those folks that that we're going to celebrate on Memorial Day, that check was cashed in, and that the cost was their life. So yeah.
Good stuff, man. Yeah, well, I don't know how you conclude a podcast like this. That's a pretty good story to end on, for sure. And I think I would like to say thanks. Excuse me. For taking the time for writing that check.
Yeah, those guys, that's it, man. That's what it is, and I really think I may be biased in my experience, but what makes America great and what it is today is because people that paid the sacrifice, and people going forward who will voluntarily be willing to die so that we can enjoy the freedoms that we enjoy. It's a very amazing thing. And that's really what makes America as great as it is. We have people, my friends and folks that I don't know, they are willing to die for people that they don't even know. And the people that they don't even know, they will never know the names of Jordan Harder. They will never know Jonathan Yale, Javier Oblice, Corey Palmer. They won't know those names, but we're willing to do that. And that's what makes us great.
Yeah. They'll know the names now. So
yeah.
Okay, this is going to conclude episode 1 in the 3-pack of episodes we are releasing on Memorial Day. This particular episode, we will conclude with the playing of taps. When we were putting this together, that was something that Zac said he felt like would be a good way to finish the podcast. So we're gonna finish this episode with the playing of taps. I hope you'll stay on and listen.